Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. It's time for Comics Revisited. Today, the Nightly News. That's right everybody, thanks for checking out the video. I am Rockin Robbie Billups, this is...
Brian Weaver.
And today we're going to be talking about the Nightly News here on Comics Revisited. It was Jonathan Hickman's very first comic. It came out from 2006 to 2007, published by Image Comics. It ran for 6 issues, and this kind of launched the career of Jonathan Hickman. It had a big impact at first. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Right now he's doing House of X, Powers of 10. Lots of people loving what Hickman's doing. Lots of people familiar with his work on other mainstream properties like Fantastic Four and the Avengers. But I don't know if so many people know some of this older creator-owned stuff, Brian. Some of my favorite Jonathan Hickman work. One of them being The Nightly News. I absolutely adore this book. I think it's fantastic. It's very striking. It's got a very... bold graphic design aesthetic to it. Like everything, it just works. It's unconventional, and it is seriously, especially for being someone's first work, and Hickman literally did everything: the writing, the artwork, the inking, the lettering, the coloring, the editing, because you can tell this book isn't heavily edited. Right. But I love it. It's a book of anger. It's a book of satire. I absolutely love it. Brian, what do you think about The Nightly News? Why are we talking about it?
Well, I think we're talking about it for a couple of reasons. I remember how I found out about it is that I didn't know who Jonathan Hickman was until I was reading Secret Warriors on Marvel, and that was 2009. And the reason I bought that was because that time Bendis, he was writing that stuff, and so like his name was attached to it. And I remember even asking, like, who is this Jonathan Hickman guy? Is this worth getting? Because, like, I was kind of worried about, like, a writer taking over and it just not being as good. Well, I was very wrong, because it was amazing. And then once I figured out who he was, someone told me about the Nightly News, and I think at that time Red Wing or Red Mask for Mars was coming out too. So he already had 3 or 4 Image titles at that point. And Nightly News was the first one I picked up, and I think one of the reasons we're talking about it is, that book made an immediate impression on me, and I can't imagine somebody reading this book and not getting some kind of reaction one way or the other, because it, if I told somebody, like, man, I'm reading this comic book and it's all about the media and it's got all these facts and everything like that, you'd probably think it was boring. Yeah. But it is not boring. And, it's, there's definitely a lot of shock elements in there. And then but like Robbie was saying, you're saying it was his first work. That's kind of mind-blowing when you look at this. Yeah. Just because, the craft in it is really solid, and that he did everything by himself. It's pretty tight. Yeah, it's an excellent book. It
definitely does provoke a reaction, and it could be the reactions can vary, but it definitely provokes a reaction. The story is about this cult, basically, called the First Church of the Brotherhood of the Voice, right? And so they have this person who's giving these messages on a cassette tape, and that's the voice, and it's given to the Hand, and the Hand is the only person who receives the message, but he's never seen the voice, and the Hand is this dude named John Gunton, or Guyton. Yeah. Guyton. And he was initially recruited by a dude named Alexander Jones, who gets arrested. So the book actually goes from Guyton's current, thing, and kind of, mixes it in with Alexander Jones, his trial, him in prison, and stuff like that. So basically what happens is it's a group of people that have all been in some way disgraced by the media. Whether they're former journalists themselves or just the subject of some kind of erroneous expose or something like that. Anytime you watch the news or read a magazine or anything and it has that bit where it's like, let's talk about the errors, sometimes those errors really affect people's lives. And so a bunch of people have their lives affected by a negative aspect of journalism, band together, they form this cult. There's all kinds of different personalities in this group. None of them get really fleshed out, except for John. I would say, Brother John. And even he's just fleshed out just kind of a little bit, kind of goes in and out all over the place. But what they start doing is they start killing journalists. So they have to kill one person to not ignite the incident. They kill a random protester, protesting like the World Bank or something like that. Yeah. And then as all the media gathers, they start killing all of them. The book is incredibly violent, and it could almost be taken as if it's because they're the protagonist, it could almost be taken as if the book is condoning this violence. But Hickman goes far out of his way within the story to kind of make that way with these little like snarky and humorous and satirical little footnotes and stuff, right, Brian?
Yeah, the first page like has a disclaimer. The first page of each of the 6 issues has a disclaimer in the bottom that says, this is not an endorsement of violence by the author. I Love Kittens, is like the first one, but those get progressively more violent.
Yes, they do.
Through, but yeah, it does seem like it's inciting violence in a way, but then, like you're saying, he does go out of his way to say it's not. But like, and it's not just the media that it's trying to expose. It's corporations and then also cults. Like, I mean, it does like, because what you're saying is like because one of the it's funny when, talk about cults to people and, you find out what they do and things like that. People, a lot of people's reaction is like, how could somebody get to that point? And it's like, well, hopefully you never find out, right? Because, I mean, to get into a cult, usually those people are pretty vulnerable in some way or another. And that's the entry point for all of these people in there is they become vulnerable because the media's corporate drive to, have these sensationalist stories and not worry about any of the damage they're creating while reporting these stories makes these people vulnerable. It destroys their lives to where they have nothing. And, and then, the Brotherhood comes in and says, well, you want to do something about it? You know, and like, so, but they do all the cult things too. They make them live in isolation. They're not allowed to have sex. They control it. They barely get to, they're rewarded with food for different things. And, so it kind of goes in a lot of different directions, but I mean, but it is a cohesive story. I don't
absolutely
make it seem like it's random.
And while it's doing all this crazy stuff, all this violence against the media and stuff like this, the media comes to the government and they're trying to make a deal and they want this law passed. It's like the Fairness to the Media Act, something like that. But it's basically just a bogus rule that I guess would have higher penalties paid for crimes against the news media because they do such a courageous job. Remember, courage, right? And here's the book, by the way, Nightly News, very striking. If you know Jonathan Hickman's work, it's going to be very visually stunning. It's going to be very bold. It's going to feel like you're reading something online, like learning something or something like that. It's almost like a PowerPoint presentation at times. It is filled with all kinds of information charts and stuff. I don't know why I'm showing them here because we put in the images there. Anyway, we'll throw a link down below if you want to get the a version of it if you don't have one down below to help support PCP and the channel. So you got the media, you got the government. They're involved in all this kind of stuff while all this violence is going on and Alexander Jones is going through his trial. Then there's this other disgraced reporter whose name is James Andrews. And he gets wrapped up into it. And then there's this other guy, Warren Rogers. Warren Rogers winds up disgracing Andrews, and it wrecks his career. So Brother John gets James Andrews and kind of convinces him to join them. And then he has that moment where he has to kill Warren Rogers. And this is the man that's ruined him, right? And then he does so. Then he takes John immediately, says, "Oh, I got you," and takes him to a therapist or something. And then they kind of pull him out of his cult programming, which he falls right back into. Then you find out Warren Rogers and James Andrews already had this plan in motion. The disgracing was fake. It was all to infiltrate. So this dude, why did he shoot one of his best friends? Really, I think the importance of that moment is that Hickman's stressing the importance of the story of breaking this, of keeping his cover. Even though it was about to get blown, literally in the next scene. I don't think this book is as strong as far as story goes as some of Hickman's other works. Right. I don't think Hickman cares about the story in this book, to be honest with you.
Right. He gets his point across successfully. I mean, he gets the points across successfully without that. But yeah, we were talking about that the other day. Like that part, like it is a little disorienting because it's not, it just doesn't seem to fit.
It just doesn't seem paced right. And maybe there should have been some more time between the initial killing, because to kill the dude, and he's only doing it to prevent his cover from being blown, even though Brother John already knows all of this stuff, right? And then he gets pulled out and goes right back in. And then ultimately, I mean, it's kind of like the bad guys who are kind of approached as the good guys kind of win. They kind of get away with it. John doesn't, obviously. He gets got.
Yeah. But
the ultimate reasoning behind everything, and then, spoilers, at the end you realize that the voice has actually been this U.S. senator. who's another character that's been in there, and you got the government, like I said, the senators, you got the media, and you got all this stuff, and apparently Jonathan Hickman doesn't have a very good impression of Dan Rather. But the book is stylish, it's angry, it's ambitious, and it's satirical. Overall, I really like the story. I do think it's ups and downs, but I think that this book is one of those style over story, and I think that the style of it, the info dumps they give you, the violent nature of it, I think all of it is meant to kind of shake you into a moment to think, because it's also a book that's going to make you think.
Yeah.
It has all this information about Ritalin and the school system, about globalization, about corporate, and he says something super scary. You pointed out about the media, where he said something like 50 years ago there was like something like, what does he say?
There was hundreds of news media outlets that individually owned, and then those are consolidated down to 10, I think, by the time the book was written.
Yeah,
and he was projecting that it would be less, and it technically is less.
Yeah,
because I was looking up some stuff the other day, because I remember the Sinclair Broadcast Group was buying up a bunch of the local TV stations, and they own 189 local TV stations across the country. Yeah. And there is plenty of bias that they're putting into these things as editorial type. They're not hiding the fact that it's biased.
Yeah.
And
I think one of the things Hickman's attacking, because Hickman goes out of his way to be like, this is a story. First of all, it's going to be filled with truths, and it's going to be filled with lies. Some of the stuff I believe, some of it I don't. All of it is really a distraction, I think, to just kind of shock you out of something, make you think. So it's like the 1-2 punch of all this information, right? Mm-hmm. Which, as far as I'm aware, is for the most part factual, right? Yeah. And then this violence, and then this crazy thing, and it's kind of like Fight Club meets Network in a way, right? And in the idea that like Fight Club is about this dude who kind of gets brainwashed, even though it's by another person inside of his own head. Right. He's brainwashed, kind of joins his cult, and they go up and they cause all this mayhem, and they're going against, like the government and corporations and stuff like that. So it does have that kind of vibe to it, with that network, with that just frustration with media that you can tell is very in here. Because this book, first and foremost, is a scathing critique of the media. Yeah. And their corporate interests. Because the idea is, I don't think Hickman is attacking journalism for putting like analysis, perspective, interpretation on news. It's the idea that the corporate interests and the political interests are bending and shaping that news. And this happens in real life. Like, the news here didn't really report on all the Contra stuff that was going on in Nicaragua because it made the country look bad. Right. There's a lot of information that kind of gets glossed over by the media at times.
Yeah, there was agreements after Vietnam because the reaction to Vietnam was so severe because people were seeing what it was actually like. Mm-hmm. That the reaction back home was so severe. There was arrangement. There was deals made not to show as much information on military operations as they have in the past because of that. Because of that effect. Yeah. I agree, because it's corporations. It's not like they were like probably ever noble. But, in the 50s, the shift really started where a corporation's goal was to maximize shareholder profit, according to Milton Friedman, economist in the 50s. Okay. So, you always hear these stories about how Ford did things to, like, he wanted to make sure his employees had enough money to buy his product. So, like, they had living wages, weekends off. That's where kind of some of that stuff started. But, in the 50s, it shifted to maximize shareholder profit. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what that kind of effect is. One of the main things he's harping on in the nightly news. And there's, I don't remember which chapter it's in. Like, it's issue 4, I want to say, where the heads of all the media companies, the major media companies, come together for a luncheon to discuss what's going on. And it gives you like short bios, and all of them are really bad about how these people were just sharks and they're just trying to maximize profit. And, they're trying to sensationalize everything, get to the story first. Doesn't matter if you're right, just get to it first, be the first one to report it. And then I think it's the NBC guy. He goes, it's real brief because it just says, this is a good man.
Yeah. It's a good man in a bad industry or something like that.
Yeah. It was pretty shocking. I mean, it was a really good effect on that part, the way he paced that there, but you're right. I mean, that's largely what, because the first chapter really, because the people are protesting the World Bank and, the corporations, and those are the first infographics are basically the income inequality, corporate effects on everything. So yeah, there's definitely a wealth of information in there, and that has really only gotten worse. I mean, keep in mind, this was written in 2006. And so there's been world events that have happened that have made these situations even worse. Yeah. You've got the recession in 2009, Citizens United, which changed how politics has been run. And that was in 2010 through 2011. You've had the proliferation of social media. I mean, social media was around in 2006, but I don't think our grandparents were using it. Yes. And everybody else was using it.
2006, I'm on MySpace.
Yeah. But that's where, that's where a lot of people discuss politics now.
Yeah. And where they get their information from.
Yeah. And it touches on one of my favorite quote in the book. I still remember from when I first read this is, I say it's my favorite and I know I'm going to butcher it, but it's where he says, the truth is analog, not digital. Yes. But if you look at the way it is today, I mean, people only talk about it digitally. It's like, you can just tell when you see an event in the news, you can tell how one side's going to react and the other side's going to react.
And they play it up on
both right.
And they play it like journalism has become more on this idea of like that we argue things. Yeah. That we disagree, we have disagreements, and that's just natural. But it seems like the media has definitely kind of, and I think this has happened in our lifetimes. We've been able to see it where it goes from reporters reporting facts and then analysts giving analysis, and you do have this kind of stuff. And I remember when Crossfire was a show, and it was its own show because that was the 30-minute or an hour block that CNN or whatever it was that had for that type of media, that kind of journalism. Yeah. That's what it all is now. I don't watch it near as much as I used to, probably for the betterment of myself, my mental stability. Yeah. But like someone will say, this is what happened, and then now let's bring in two opposing views. And then depending on what network you're on, some people will get more of a shift and other people, because obviously these media companies, some of them, like, you cannot argue that Fox News is not politically motivated, right? I mean, come on. Like, it's like so obvious, right? People talk about the liberal media. Well, the liberal and the conservative media. I mean, that's what it is. They're owned by corporations. They're owned by people who are owned by politicians, basically. They're all
just as mainstream.
Yes. Absolutely, right? The way that the book presents all this information, though, with all the different charts and graphs and the striking artwork, it's like filled with graphic design. Now, we know that Hickman is huge into graphic design. He's huge into circles. He loves putting circles all over everything, and it's obvious that he's always wanted to do this, so it's no surprise that this has continued on even into his work for hire, like with not so much Fantastic Four, but when he was able to really kind of do what he wanted to do. Look at his Avengers run.
Yeah, the wheel.
But now look at House of X and Powers of 10, where it's like all over the book. It's like reading Black Monday Murders with mutants.
Yeah. I don't know if they had the infographics, but they did. He did a little bit of that stuff too with Secret Warriors, and then into S.H.I.E.L.D. too. Yeah, where the circles and stuff like that with the things. Yeah, so I was gonna point out earlier, that his art approach is like I don't know if he's got a graphic design degree, but I mean I think that was his job before he
it would make sense,
dedicated himself to working in comics, and and it definitely shows. I mean, it's like a lot of the stuff, very simple shapes, and he knows how to position things in ways to draw your eyes through the book, one thing you were talking about, like with the voices on these cassettes and you never see them, and I don't know if you noticed, but all of his dialogue balloons were black. Like, so you always knew it was the voice. Yeah. And I don't know if he did that I don't know if he did a style for others, but he was really, really conscious about the decisions he was making for those balloons too. Like, he was really good about pacing it where you figured out that the person wasn't in the shop, but you knew who it was. Like, I mean, for a first comic book to get all that right is impressive.
And to break convention while doing it. Right. The word balloons themselves, they're all squarish. Yeah. That's something that's not normal in comic books. There's not really any kind of panels or grid that's used. There are moments where that's appropriate and where that happens and to maximum effect. Yeah. That one scene that you talk about with the target and the 9-panel grid. That's
one of my favorite pages. There are 2 pages in the thing there.
The rest of it, though, there's it's basically images stacked around each other, some infographics here, some circles here, and sometimes the circles are just there for probably because Hickman likes them, and other times they're there because they guide you across the page.
Yeah.
And it really it breaks convention, and it's groundbreaking, and it's innovative, and even the way that he approaches it. How many times now do you open up a comic book and you have a little cold opening in a way, then you flip to a double page spread of the title with design work. Yeah. That didn't happen back in the day.
Yeah.
But post Hickman, that happens all the time now. Even in books like Going to the Chapel and Something is Killing the Children. Just that bold double. I remember when I was editing Black Spec over at Dance Panda Comics, I was pushed for that so hard, publisher wouldn't allow it, not enough page count. But I still think that I'm still telling you, Lance, it would have been better if we would have had that big moments, things like that. He uses photo reference, but he disguises it in such a way that really makes it work. He doesn't. That's not all his art. A lot of it is photos.
It's photos. He puts them in Photoshop and draws over them with layers and stuff.
And it looks great. It's stiff. And it's a little stagnant. There's not a lot of dynamic, kinetic energy and motion that's in this book at all, even with the excessive violence, because there is action in the book. But the book itself doesn't read as action-packed. And I think it actually helps kind of the coldness and the inhumanity of what's actually happening in the book as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the action, you understand exactly what's going on in the action, but what I'm used to in a traditional action book is you have a lot of panels with no dialogue that show fights kind of going through these things, and you don't have that.
You get some panels that would shorten up, motion lines.
Yeah, you don't have any motion lines in this that I recall.
Just circles.
Because it'll show somebody doing something, and then in the next panel there's just a hole.
Yeah.
In the corner of their head. I mean, it's
really. I remember the first time I read it, I was like, "What just happened?"
Yeah.
Oh, they just blew their head away.
Yeah. Then you see the blam over it. It's like, oh. Yeah.
Oh man, the book could have worked in black and white, but it's much more effective in color. The coloring is amazing.
Yeah.
It's kind of at times monochromatic in a way. All the past stuff is kind of shaded a little bit more blue. Current stuff's a little bit more sepia tone.
Yeah, that was a conscious design to make sure you knew which time things were.
Yeah, and it's it's to maximum effect. We talked about the circles, but we also got the diagonal lines.
Yeah,
that really represent Alexander Jones mostly. You were talking about.
I think that's his motif there. That one page that we were talking about earlier. I think it's the only 9-panel spread in this comic, and I love 9-panel spreads, and especially when they're used, very cleverly. And this one was where the one of the newscasters was in the odd numbered panels, and there was a target over the center one, and then the 9th one was broken with that diagonal motif.
Yeah.
With
the next page,
and then the next page he kills him. It was a great break. I mean, very, very clever. It just looked amazing. And then also it showed Alex Jones in the asylum, and I mean the whole room had those diagonal lines, and it's actually it's spaced, so it's very disorienting actually to look at on the page. When I went on my reread, I opened it and I went, whoa.
Yeah, right.
And then it had his logo underneath him, which I thought was really cool too. But yeah, I was reading one of the things where he was talking about his process. He actually put all the text on first.
Wow. Interesting.
And
so that
when I read that,
you're saying that the word balloons, the lettering, influenced the design and the composition of each page then?
Yeah.
Wow, that came first.
Yeah.
Weird.
Which I thought was, in certain pages it made sense, because when you were talking about how the pages don't have panels, you could see a conversation going down, and it's basically just images going down the page, which is, I don't know any other comic that does that. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but
throughout every single page.
I'm sure there are, but I mean, that's the way it was done, and it kind of follows those text things and everything like that. I thought it was really cool.
That's super cool. So you obviously got the theme of the critique of the media, and they're serving the corporate interests, or the who are in turn serving a political interest, and you got all this, stuff. A lot of that is influenced by Noam Chomsky.
Yep.
Right, and he's a professor, a linguistic professor.
Yes.
Right, and he's also writes about politics. He's a family. I did a brief Wikipedia search of this guy. A lot of his ways of thinking, it seems like, I even read one really bad review of this book in which the person said, this just seems like someone read some Chomsky, didn't understand it, and just regurgitated it all back to a page. Of course, he shouted out in the book. Elaborate a little bit more on that connection for me, since you know more about Professor Brian here.
Well, I'm familiar with who he is. I haven't read any of his books. I've always wanted to, but I mean, I've heard people quote him and talk about him a lot. But part of that running theme was he talks about the effect of media and the effects of politics on people in general. And so there's a couple instances where people say quotes, and then the other person guesses who that quote is. And the first one, I don't remember the quote. I think it's about propaganda limiting choice, which goes back to the digital analog kind of conversation. And they said, "Oh, let me guess, that's Chomsky," and the answer was, "No, it's Goebbels." And then like the second one, it was like, "Oh, let me guess, that's Goebbels," and it was like, "No, it's Hitler." And then eventually they do get to Chomsky quote, So I mean, it's part of that running theme in there, because it's, I do want to read more of Chomsky, but it's always hard to kind of find some of that stuff. But with the critique of the media, a lot of it talks about like the trust of people in media, the trust of the common person in media, should we have it, and things like that. And nowadays it's even lower than it has been probably when this book came out. But that's one of the facts he was providing in there. And as part of the corporate nature of media is he pointed out a couple of companies they completely fired their fact checking divisions. Yeah. Which is huge when you think about it, because like this is who we rely on to get information. We don't have access. We don't have access to it, and like so. I mean, it just even more kind of reinforces the point that it's about projecting images. Truth isn't as important. Facts like aren't as important. It's the argument about who's right seems to be more important, or getting there faster and getting more of that emotional response. Which I don't want to downplay emotional responses. They're incredibly important to how we handle the world. But yeah, I don't know. It was I do remember being very angry when I first read this.
Yeah, right. Okay, I got you.
It helped me understand what some of the things I was angry about better.
Okay.
In general.
Okay, I can dig that. The book also approaches the idea of the us versus them. They use so first of all, the protagonists are domestic terrorists. Basically, right? Absolutely. And it's kind of almost in a way like set up like something like The Matrix, where the whole point of The Matrix was that if you really look at it, the good guys like Morpheus and all those freedom fighters, like they're bad guys because they're killing these people, you know? And there's this idea that it's us versus them and the machines are bad, but the whole ultimate end of The Matrix was that there is no good, there is no bad. These are both two sides of the same thing. That polarity, that's something I think Hickman is talking about here, because some people would read into this book and think that Hickman's trying to show that the only way to solve this is through a violent revolution or something like that. I don't think that's the point, because as well as being a critique of media, corporations, and government, it's a critique of the people that critique the media, the government, and the corporations. He totally deconstructs his own idea in the book by showing the cult of the voice, the Church of the Voice, or whatever, the Brotherhood of the Voice.
Absolutely, yeah.
After he tears it apart, he paints it in a light where there's no difference. And then when you get to the end, and the revelation of who the voice is, there is literally no difference between the voice and the interest that they're trying to stop. It's just all part of the same thing. You know what I'm saying? And that's something I think I got from The Invisibles. It's something I've got from The Matrix, and it's something I get from the Nightly News. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like to think about the concept of the ends justifying the means a lot, and like this to me is a good example of that too. It's like, we want our media to serve the people the way it's intended to serve it, but these means don't justify that ends, right? Yeah. And it's very plain. At first, it obviously the focal point of the story is these characters that you're supposed to have sympathy for because of how they were damaged by the press and everything like that, but you very quickly don't. It's like, no, this is not the way to do this. Yeah.
It's like the reveal in Fight Club where you're like on their side until you're not. Yeah. And then you're like, oh no. And it made whoa, how easy it would be to get riled up and brought into something like this and this thinking. Mm-hmm. So it does lead to the question, what is the answer then? Is Jonathan Hickman trying to tell us that the answer to this problem is excessive violence? No. He's trying to tell us, I believe, that the answer to this problem is to make art like this. Fueled by your rage, fueled by your intelligence, fueled by what you know, what you're passionate about. Putting that out there. Because violence isn't the answer, art's the answer. Right. And reading something like Nightly News, has led more people into thinking and understanding a little bit more and maybe just questioning. And maybe all Hickman wants is for you to be entertained. He wants you to laugh. The book is funny. Like I said, it's satirical. It will crack you up. Especially some of the comments about Dan Rather. That one about Dan Rather cracks me up so much. But anyway, so I think that's what's going on. And I think he's even showing through some of the stiffness of the artwork because it doesn't move. I think he's showing the inhumanity. It's a very cold aesthetic to the artwork at times, right? Right. And I think that's intentional because I think that the protagonists are not meant to be the good guys. I think the whole point I think the good guy is supposed to be the reader. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. This is something very much like V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta kind of proposes the same idea. Like, how do you overthrow without violence? Well, there's got to be another way. Maybe it's the work itself that is what you're supposed to do. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the answers to that one either. But no, I think information helps. I mean, exposing people to different things, different ideas and things, all that just helps. It helps slowly. It takes a long time, and because if you look at the course of human history, things slowly progress. You can look at lots of different things, to actually have hope about the world. You know, I mean, there's this book that I have not finished called Factfulness that actually helps paint a much better, brighter picture of the world. I mean, think about lots of diseases that rarely do we have to deal with anymore. Yeah. That's a result of, the slow progression of humanity. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, I don't know.
I think Hickman made this book so he wouldn't go out and shoot someone. Just kidding, obviously. I don't think Hickman's a violent person. He likes Martha Stewart. He does his own cooking, and he likes to, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, like you get that. I absolutely love this book. I'm a huge fan of Jonathan Hickman, even though he is a Clemson fan. I think that this book, first of all, cemented Hickman's career. It was not shortly after this where Marvel snatched this dude up. Right. He had other works like Pax Romana, which is one of my favorite Hickman books. Yeah. Like I said, he got snatched up by Marvel. His creator-owned work went from these small little miniseries like Transhuman, Red Mask from Mars, now have developed into things like Manhattan Projects and into the opus of East of West, things like that. So it definitely also helped the idea of how important graphic design is in comic books. I know it has always been important, and there are examples before Nightly News, but I really feel the Hickman influence with graphic design in the comic book industry, especially the indie world right now, like hardcore, is what I feel. Overall, I love this book. I highly recommend it. If you've made it through this video somehow and you've never read it and we spoiled everything, you still want to check it out, links down below where you can check out the book for yourself. Brian, final thoughts, the Nightly News.
Yeah, I mean, I'd highly recommend this book. It's one, this is probably my third or fourth reread of it. And yeah, Jonathan Hickman is definitely in my top set of writers. I mean, I was super excited when heard he was being on X-Men, and have been thoroughly pleased so far with that. His ability to do the long range stories and have things all tie together and with real cool science ideas too. It's just great. I mean, because like his I've actually read his Avengers and Secret Wars run 2 or 3 times, which is nearly 100 issues. I mean, it's intensely long, but it's amazing. And East to West is, I think, one of the best comics. Period. I can't wait for the final chapter to start soon. All time. But yeah, I highly recommend Nightly News. Absolutely, you will learn a lot, and it'll change you emotionally for a little bit.
Just a little bit. Anyway, let us know.
Recover. But,
Yeah. Thank you for checking out the video. Let us know your recollections when you revisit and reread the nightly news down in the comments below. We really do appreciate everything. Be sure to join us next week for Comics Revisited, where me and Jelani are going to be talking about JLA by Grant Morrison. That's right, the entirety of Grant Morrison's JLA run, or as I like to refer to it, my holy Bible. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out the video. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And join us over at patreon.com/PCP, where you can get early access to things, exclusive content like the PCP After Hours show, all that and more. And of course, don't forget our podcasts on iTunes, other podcast services, and of course, popculturephilosophers.com. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. This has been
Brian Weaver, not yet brought to you by Disney.
Not yet. And this has been the Nightly News. Anyway, that's not how I sign off. Thanks for watching. Kramer!